Hello everyone, this is a homework 3 announcement video. Now in homework 3, we have actually 3 different questions here. And again, you will have a template, I will talk about that. And yeah, let's look at the 3 questions that we have. First of all, the first question is a 40-point worth question. And it goes as follows. We have a special calculator that can only add and subtract numbers. But the calculator is not going to be a calculator where we have just multiple inputs and operands. The calculator will accept basically a string. So the input is entered as one-line text, and the input is decomposed into its operands and operations. The result is calculated and returned. So it means that we will give it a char pointer, and it will just calculate the contents of that char pointer. And we will only have numbers, additions, and subtractions. I have a demo. It is calc.exe. Now, if I enter, for example, 2 plus 3 plus 13 plus 50 minus 100, hit enter, it will give me minus 32. Let's do it again. So calc 2 plus 3 minus 3 gives me 2. Now, this calculator takes in the characters in one line, and it will just convert it into their expressions. It will calculate it. That's the algorithm that you're going to develop, and it will return me the integer result. So I again have prepared some templates for you, and in the templates you again have student.c, and this is basically the function that you need to implement, and that's all. Here, when we call this function, for example, for the calculator example, this is exactly the code that is going to run. If you want to test it, you can just do this, use scanf, it scanfs the whole thing, passes it to the calculator that is implemented here. It returns the result, and we printf the result, and that's it. You can toy around with this main function because this whole thing will not be uploaded at all. You can just use this main function, change it as you wish to test out your questions as usual. But this is going to be the file that you are going to submit. Now here you should maybe define it a name, char name, or string, and that's basically it. So I'm sorry. So it will take the string, decompose it into its operations and operands, so numbers and pluses and minuses, calculate the thing, and return an integer. So as you can see, the 40 points, as you can see from here, it is not that easy. It's also not that difficult, but it has its difficulty. So you should basically come up with an algorithm that can use only char strings. Don't use any scanfs, don't change anything about that. The only scanf that is happening here is given, so use this. It will accept only a string, and it will only return the result. Okay, that's important, because I'm going to call this function like it is. I'm not going to use anything that you will define here. Don't put any int main file in here. Just implement me or give me the implementation here. Nothing else. So, now, by the way, in the calculator function, you should stick with C, and all the includes that you probably need are already given here. stdio and math, is just enough. So that's question 1. So a calculator that turns a string into this here. As far as I know, the calculator of Windows is not even like that. Is it like that? No. So I want to maybe do something like 5 plus 5 plus 5. So it's not what I'm looking for. You can see the distinction here. This just immediately gives me some results, but the calculator here takes the whole string. It can be as long as possible. Actually, the limit here is 255 characters, but it's not really important. We can increase that. And yeah, it's just basically calculating the whole stuff. By the way, if you're asking yourself about the size of the string, you should know that some characters here have null termination, so you can just use the pointer here and determine the length of the char vector here, because it will be null terminated. And by null termination, I mean that there's a special null character here. You can just use a while loop and then look for the character. If this is that, then you're basically, if the character is equal to this, then you can basically stop. So you would have a while loop, and then you will have int I equals 0, and you would increment it. Once you hit this here, the length or int length would be the I value that you have. So you can implement your own string length function here if you need it, or you could just add it here somewhere, acquire the length, and then maybe work on it. So if you need the length here, don't pass the integer length here. So yeah, that's basically it here. And that's question 1. A calculator based on string operations or based on a string gives you the result. Question 2 is not a hard one, but yeah, we have 2 different integration methods. One of them is integrate Simpson. You will get 2 floats to calculate that. So these floats are basically the lower and upper bounds here. So lower bound and upper bound. This is going to be the integral from a to b. But here we have a specific integral, so you can just ask for a and b, and you're going to use you're going to implement integrate Simpson using the Simpson's rule, and you are also going to implement the integrate numeric one, which is going to be quite easy to implement because it is numeric integration. You should already know what this is, but if you don't know, it relies on basically the rectangles, I guess. It was something like that. So we have a certain function. We're just having small rectangles that try to match the area beneath the function, and we sum that in order to get basically the approximate integral here. If that's still not enough, what you can remember, by the way, the question 2 functions are integrate Simpson and integrate numeric. If you struggle with that, just remember that dx divided by dt is ft, something like this. So what we can do, we can just say dx is df dt, and then x is going to be the integral of ft dt. Now, instead of doing this, what we can do is we can approximate this here by delta x delta t. And by delta, I mean x, let's say, n minus x n minus 1 divided by t n minus t n minus 1. So if this is f, or let's call it ft here, you can work out the way of calculating this, because we have parentheses here. because then this would be multiplied with this, and I would then also bring this to the right side here. So basically, this would be then the formula that you are going to use in discrete math. And since integral is a sum, you have a summation here. So you should be basically able to implement this numeric integration. Uh, these should give us basically almost same results. Since this is numeric, you might end up in a slight different floating point numbers. I still have a integrate. So it works for my implementation. I got the integral equals 1 here, but there are some small slight differences here which I don't really care, which can be adapted or which can be refined, but there will be some errors in the results, but they should give the same here. Since we have the sine x dx from 0 to pi divided by 2, yeah, you can just use pi as you wish, but since here you need to write down something like integrate Simpson, and then from 0 to 3.14 divided by 2, and then maybe printf percentage %d new line, comma that, and that would be basically the test code for integrate numeric. We also have numeric. There we go. You could use this for question 2 testing. There we go. So yeah, that would be basically it. So basically question 2 is just a direct implementation thing. You can look for integration using Simpson's rule and the basic numeric integral that we all know. So this is question 2, and again you will implement these here in integrate numeric and integrate Simpson. Now, the last question here is about grades, and we have a table of grades. If you are between 0 and 29, you will get an FF. If your grade is between 30 and 41, DD, 42 and 53 make up DC, 54, 64 CC, etc., etc. 94 and 100 make AA. So this is kind of the grading policy. Now you are going to implement a function that is given void grade here. Again, we have all the necessary functions that you have to implement. The first function is this one here that will be called, and your code will be graded. Then this is Q2 here, and then this will be Q3. This is all you have to fill in, and of course you can toy around with the main function here. Yeah, and you are going to implement the grade function that is given here, and its aim is to use an input.txt file, read the grades, and then create an output.txt, which will be then the results. Now, the files are given below. We have just one file. For example, one student got 2060, so it's midterm and final exam, obviously. Midterm, final exam, there are several students here. And the output is then generated as follows. Their average, which is a weighted average, for 40% of the midterm exam and 60% of the final exam, creates your grade. So 40% times 20 plus 60% times 60 added together gives us 44. And since 44 is in this interval, we get DC. So this is kind of generated. And we also have the overall score. So what is the average of the midterm exam? It was 60. You add all of the grades together, take the average, not weighted average, by the way. You take the average of the final exam. You take the average of the grades here, 44, 34, etc. And you kind of create this txt file. So I also have an example for that. So this is input.txt. You can just toy around with that. And when you run it, I have grade.exe. So it's creating this output.txt, and you can see this is basically the result. So in input.txt, we had 6 students here. We again have 6 students here. And we have also the results here. We can see that there are the nodes, and we can see that's the average, etc., etc. So it's kind of an Excel implementation, but we're implementing it on our own. And the function is here. Since it doesn't need any input, any output, it is just a void function without any arguments. It will always look for an input.txt file, and it will always generate the results in output.txt. That's it. So if you call grade here, you can just call grade here, and that's basically it. And I will provide you an example file, therefore you can just use that. But since it is quite obvious how input.txt is generated, you can just see it's a comma separated file, and the output is like this. So that's it basically. Again, let me remind you that main.c will not be submitted. You can toy around with this. Don't toy around with the definitions. Just don't mess up the definitions. If it's a float function, implement it as a float function. But I highly recommend you to download these files here and just work on them. Don't change, don't write it from scratch. Why bother if you have it already available to you? Just implement the code here and submit this whole file as it looks like here. So good luck.